Hi, everybody. It's Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze. We have a really special guest today. We have Joan Silber, the author of Mercy, which is it's one of my top books of the year and forever. We're going to talk about it. So just a few housekeeping things first before I introduce Joan. You all know that the chat is on the right. Got questions, pop them in the chat. I'll ask them for you. Comments, we love having comments. That's great too. I've put a link so you can pick up Joan's book through bookshop.org. It'll tell you the nearest indie bookstore close to you, and that will be absolutely terrific. Also, I just want to tell you, we're going to be doing, the Mighty Blaze is doing a book show tonight at 8 o'clock, and all the hosts are going to be recommending books. And I, of course, this is my recommendation for Joan Silber's books, all her books right here. So let's talk about Joan. Joan Silber. I first met Joan Silber in I think it was your first novel, Joan.
I think so.
It was your first novel, and I read it, and I just was so done in because I didn't realize that you could create such an intimate sense of life and people on the page. And so, of course, I stalked Joan for years, trying to get to know her, and I finally did, and now we're friends, and it's just extraordinary. So Joan Silber is the author of 10 books of absolutely extraordinary fiction. Improvement won the National Book Critics Circle Award and the PEN Faulkner Award. Her previous book, Secrets of Happiness, was a Washington Post and Kirkus Review Best Book of the Year. She's the recipient of a PEN Malamud Award for Excellence. She lives in New York City in the greatest apartment in the world, and she has great taste in vegan cheese, Rebel cheese, for all of you vegans out there. So here's her book. Let me show you the gorgeous cover. We were just talking about it. Mercy. Doesn't this look like the Lower East Side to those of you who lived in the Lower East Side in the 70s and 80s? Does to me. Mercy begins in the 1970s with this morally compromising act that will haunt the pages and the interconnected lives of the characters. It starts with Ivan, who leaves his best friend Eddie overdosing in a New York City ER, which, by the way, is St. Vincent's, which everybody knew St. Vincent's, which closed down, but it was great. And St. Vincent's also had the only pediatric ER in the city, which was great, which was actually great. Okay, then there's Kara, who at 10 years old, falls from a roof and survives, but her friendship with Nina now has fault marks. We get the lives of Ginger, Eddie's one-time girlfriend, and then we go into the life of Kara's now 26-year-old daughter. Mercy is really about choices, the choices we make that shadow us through our lives, that both disconnect and connect us to each other. And it's also really about family, friendship, love, and mercy. And I have to say that I just devoured this book. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So let's see what other people say about it. Hernan Diaz, Pulitzer Prize winner for Trust, says, Joan Silber's sweeping yet intimate novel traces the delicate patterns by which others, often from afar and unknowingly, may determine our innermost longings and even our fate. Mercy is a profound, gorgeously written reflection on identity, friendship, and love. It's a book that keeps echoing long after turning the last page. And Caroline Farrell, author of Miss Metropolitan, says, the universe of Joan Silber's superb new novel is vast yet particular. It holds its inhabitants accountable for their actions, forgiving them, shaking them, blinding their destinies through the power of stories. What do the vanished owe the visible? What do the living owe the dead? As Mercy tackles these powerful questions, it reveals itself to be a true masterpiece. And, I have to agree. Thank you so much, Joan, for being here. We were talking about, before we got interrupted by having to go live, we were talking about the very fascinating thing that portions of this novel originally appeared in magazines. And I had asked you, how did you know it needed to be a novel? What was that process like? And three-part question here. Did you feel the characters were changing as were you rewriting some of these stories or just, finessing them so they made more of a novel?
Yes, I was. So, I mean, I always work in pieces, and I don't have that much of a plan. I have a habit, I always say, instead of a scheme. But I knew I wanted the pieces to fit as they started. But the characters certainly changed as I worked on them. Particularly, I would say Ginger, who becomes Astrid, the
Right, Jim
girlfriend of one
Contessa.
of the characters. She actually, I mean, she gets older and she has a long career in acting and has a complicated and interesting life. So, I mean, she's haunted by her own ghosts. So she came to me more slowly. I worked on that, and uh, I worked on the last part of the book, which I will not disclose, and that changed. So I wanted them to fit and make more of a coherent whole, but I was also lost in the parts, which I love. I love being, with the characters.
The novel starts with a really provocative question, which I love, which is what's the worst thing you've ever
Right.
done? I mean, what's so great about this? People always kind of talk about the good they've done or what a good person they are. But how do you think that the bad things we do, whether deliberately or just by chance, define us? Or does that definition depend on how we react once we've done those bad things?
I think that my editor said when I was working on it that everybody past a certain age has things that they regret, which I was sort of glad to hear, since the book is about that. But the question itself, a friend was talking about his college age daughter and how hard she was on his generation as teenagers are, and I thought that she might ask. I mean, she was a perfect person to ask a question like that and get it in the dialogue. And I also, the minute I thought of the guy deserting his friend when the friend is overdosed, I knew that he would never tell anyone. That was very important to me, that it remain a secret. So, like a lot of the wrong things we've done in our lives of various degrees, he never tells anyone. And even when at one point he does act, at the beginning they're just kids fooling around with drugs, but by
Right.
the end of his chapter, he really, or by the middle of his chapter, he really is a junkie, and he ends up going into a 12-step program, and he's not supposed to keep something like that a secret. I mean,
Right.
that's anybody can read the steps, and that's not, one of the steps is you own up to what you've done. And so that was important to me, that he fools himself and other people in some way, although he does get better. He becomes a better person.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about that. I loved it that Ivan went to AA because there's not supposed to be any judgment in AA. People usually don't comment after you say something; they just sort of nod and talk it in. And to me, it felt that the mercy in AA was just to say the word, to claim the action. But then there's the second part. What do you do about it? How do you repent? Is it just enough to say it? I think Ivan's burden is that he can say and claim anything except for what he did with Eddie, his friend. But sort of butted up against that is Ginger. Ginger's an actress, and she insists that not everything has to be said aloud, which is direct opposition to what AA says. Of course, Ginger says that because she doesn't like criticism. So I want to ask you, I think you do have, I mean, personally, I think you do have to claim what you've done. But do you feel that in order to have real mercy, there has to be a second part where you either, make amends or just say, well, that was a part of me and I'm going to be better?
I would say in the process of writing the book, I began with the idea that I was interested in ways of repenting, and then also just in remorse itself, in the emotion more than the act. And as I worked on it, the actions of mercy became more interesting to me. So people wishing each other mercy is, of course, the most central form of it. And of course, and I wanted to sort of elevate the story by having characters think about that. but of course, opium is the drug of mercy. So I wanted to show within this story both, the dangers of heroin addiction, which we all know about, and also its other forms. I mean, we see it as a plant that is used all over the world, as the handiest medicine for simple things and for pain. And then, and many of us will die with a morphine pump as our aid. I mean, that's a really, that's a crucially used form in this point. So I wanted to get all of that kind of being a circle around the story as well.
So I also want to add, it's really clear in the book as that you, as the writer, have a great deal of mercy for your characters and for Ivan. And what impressed me so much is that you wrote all the Ivan stuff so that we totally understand why he did what he did and why he is who he is, and we feel how haunted he is. But I wanted to ask, if it was just you, Joan, the person, and Ivan was a friend of yours, would you have shown him mercy for his action?
Well, it depends at what stage of life I met him also.
That's right.
If someone told me the story now, I would listen with something like mercy. When I was younger, I of course would have been quicker to think, oh, I'd never do a thing like that. But the way I wanted that part written, where we're with him when he gets the hell out of there and leaves his friend, and we've been with him before when they're really friends. I wanted it to feel like he's doing the wrong thing, but it's not unthinkable.
Right, I think that's right, because he's young. He's young and he's scared and he's high.
Right. And certain, I mean, and he has some reason to be afraid. I mean, people are held liable for what he did. So, and also it's quickly. It's a sin of avoidance. It's not a sin of commission, right? I mean, he doesn't hurt anybody on purpose. So if someone told me this story now, also my forgiveness is not required, but I got more interested in mercy than in forgiveness, in fact. But then, I have to figure out how all the other characters in the story might feel about him if they knew, although most of them don't know, but they're judging each other through all of it. But I have one. This is when I give talks on writing. I have one talk I give that's called generosity, and I'm interested in a generosity to my characters as an author.
Okay. I want to talk about Ginger / Astrid, who becomes an actress. And I love that because in a way she gets to escape into a whole different persona. But yet in another way, her being on screen is a brilliant connection device to her friends, all of these group of friends, Eddie and Ivan, because they get to see her on screen. And whether she knows it or not, they watch her and they feel connected. Did you always know that she was going to be an actress?
It's hard to. I may not have known because in the first chapter, it's they're not paying any attention to her taking acting classes. So, but I'm not quite sure when I knew it. But it was important to me that she, that her fame be able to haunt them. I have had friends who studied acting and did some acting, and I had one friend who was in a soap opera on TV, and it's very strange, to watch them because you think, oh, that's Elaine, but Elaine doesn't talk like that. She would never utter that dumb script, So that I guess I wanted that emotion in there.
It is. It's very strange. It's if I watch a series on TV and I get enamored of one of the characters, then I wonder about them, but I'm not wondering about them as the actor. I'm wondering about them as the character because that's how I know them. So what I also loved in this book is this whole idea. Let me just show the gorgeous cover again. The whole idea that we're always connected with those, even with those who were in our lives, even when they're gone. These characters in this book, they think about the people missing in their lives all the time. They talk to them. It's a comfort, actually, after a terrible loss of somebody from your life, to imagine that they're somehow still there. So what I wanted to ask you is, do you believe that when you're really changed by a person, they always somehow stay in your life, even if it's just by dint of memory, that they somehow get into your DNA?
I don't know if I believe it, literally, they're not literally in my DNA, but they're certainly my capacity for memory is great enough. So certainly, and I think that one of the pieces when it was sent out as a story was called Ghosts, and I think that we are haunted by people, who are in our lives, and you can't get to be a certain age without having the dead around you and the dead with you. So I mean, you're going to outlive people you loved. So that's certainly a feeling in the story.
One of the characters asked this question that I underlined and then put up here to ask you about. How do you forge a life in the midst of injustice? That's a really great question, especially for today. What's the best way to do that? Your characters have various ways that they've tried to do this, but would you like to answer this for yourself?
Oh, well, that's I certainly. I mean, we all think about this every day now.
Yeah,
Living
yeah.
in a merciless society. Um, I, um, I do. I mean, I have some, activists. I go to demonstrations. I sign things. I mean, it seems unclear now what will have an effect. I think we all feel that. I do have one story that I wrote recently that has something about deportations in it. And I was so happy I was able to do that, because it's very hard to write about the world we live in. It's much easier to write about,
Yeah.
what people should have done, 40 years ago. So, but I think we have to do all that we possibly can, and it becomes clearer what we can do as time goes on, I think.
Right, right. But I also think, in going back to what people do or don't talk about in mercy, that we have to be really verbal. I think that we have to get really mouthy, that being silent is not justifiable right now.
Yeah.
There's another quote that Nina says at one point: "How do we ever get anything done with love in the world?" I love this quote, because another question could also be, how do we ever get anything done when we have other people in our lives? Because there's always choices. If you love your work, but you also love your friend, and your friend needs to talk to you, but you also need to finish this chapter, do you follow your heart, even if it means getting fired? Or do you feel that love of people, of work, of animals, of place should really just be our compass?
Oh, I think there's no easy answer to that. There's no set answer. I think, if I remember right, Nina is saying it as a mental thing, like love is a source of distraction all the time, right? And certainly my characters have, thick internalized, where they're full of longing and, musing and stuff like that. I would say, for myself, in terms of writing, and I mean, it depends. I have certain hours as a writer when I work. I'm an afternoon writer, and people know not to call me then. But if someone called me with an emergency, I would go.
Right, right, right. Okay, so tell us about Nina's work with love and courtship within the, I'm going to mispronounce it, I bet, the Mian, based in Thailand and China. I found that fascinating. I'd like to know more about it.
Well, I wanted her to, to go. I wanted her. The reason that I decided that she should be a character in the first place is, in an earlier chapter, she said she has the great line, "Sexual behavior is a social construct," because she's an anthropologist. So I just thought that was a great. All fiction writers sort of know that, right? I mean, our cravings are eternal and are human, but the way we act them out has to do with our time and place. So once I made her an anthropologist, I had to send her somewhere, or I wanted to send her somewhere. And I used to do lots of travel in Southeast Asia. I traveled a lot to both Thailand and Laos. And and I also taught English just as a volunteer for like a month at a time in Luang Prabang in Laos and in Chiang Mai in Thailand. And in both places, one of the indigenous groups is the Mien. And they look so elegant. I mean, the women have these beautiful black turbans, and they wear these kind of cross tops that have what looks like a fur boa on it. It's a fluffy red wool thing that trims. Anyway, and their language is closer to Chinese, and also, unlike many groups, they have a traditional written language, which is a very old form of Chinese. So the more I read about them, the more interested I was in them, and so I got to place my character there and kind of use her. I could only go so far. She gets wounded, or she falls and breaks her ankle early on because I didn't want to presume beyond a certain point. But I loved working with the ideas that every group has its own rules about what's okay and what's not okay.
Right, absolutely. So if we're all connected, what are we doing wrong? Because so many of us fear abandonment all the time. What's the missing piece of that, do you think?
Oh, I wish I had the answer to that. I think that I'm always interested in self-reliance also, and
Right.
you'll notice that the characters I like can sort of tend to themselves, so that's a big part of it. I think also the connection. I mean, the connections. I believe we're all connected, and certainly, my I'm not a card-paying member of any religion, but my ideas are very influenced by Buddhism. I'm a Jew by birth and by identity. I'll always be that. But Buddhism has had a lot to do with my thinking, and they certainly believe that we're all connected. That's a tenet of the belief, all humans. But not all the connections are what I would think of as causal. That I'm connected by chance to everyone.
Right.
Yeah, some of them are causal. Some of them, I did that to them and they did that to me, but not all of them are. But I love tracing out those connections. I think it's really important. I don't know that the only guide that I have to behavior is generosity and mercy, which we can't do all the time.
Right.
I wish we could, but that would be, absolute compassion is the one ethical principle that all religions have, but we can't act that out all the time. We're not capable.
Okay, that leads to the question, should we ever give up on a person? I bet you're going to say it depends.
I am like that.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person's relation to you, and it also depends on what they did.
Right, that's true.
How mortal the sins are.
Okay. The novel's incredibly ambitious. I mean, it spans decades, has a big cast of characters, and yet every single character is just indelible. How difficult was that for you to juggle? Did you write like a whole story for Astrid first, and then like break it up into stories that you're going to weave in with the stories of Ivan and Eddie and everybody else?
That's a good question. I pretty much did each character edit. I wrote a story for each character, narrated by each character, but I changed them as I went along. Like, oh, I have to put in this now. This will require this. So I'm working on the parts. Well, you do that as a novelist anyway. I'm working on the parts and the whole together. And I would say the end required the most afterwork. After everything was done, I had to go over that and make it clearer. I like that. I like that work. It's a little excruciating, but I like the process of getting clearer to myself about what I meant. But I wanted to be a fiction writer because I was so interested in character. When I was young, I thought I was going to be a poet, and I moved from that to fiction when I was in my 20s because of the character thing. I just wanted that so badly.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like I always say that writing is the best job in the world because you get to live all these other lives.
Yes.
And of course, the flip side is it's also excruciating because it's really difficult. So without giving anything away, if I asked you about these characters 10 years from today or 10 years from when the books ended, could you venture what their lives are like? You can just pick three. Just pick three characters and tell me, or even pick two.
Well, one of them is dead. Nini is dead. We're told that she died in the other stories. I would say That's quite interesting. I mean, Astrid is a kind of matriarch actress by the end of it.
Right, right.
So, and I think I imagined her continuing to get parts and to do as much work as she does. She, her big part that she's given credit for in the story is she plays an English colonial woman in China, in Hong Kong, who manages to kill herself with opium, which is actually not that hard to do. You have to eat it. Or is hard to do, not that easy to do. But I see her going on as an actress and going on with her life. Her kids are going to keep giving her trouble, I think.
That's what kids do. That's their job.
That's their job. That's their job. I'm trying to think of who else we can think about. I don't think about the characters.
You don't think about them once the book is over, then it's over.
I think about them as people in the book. I mean, but I don't imagine further futures for them. I don't.
Do you ever go back to the book and like open it and reread a piece of it just to revisit them?
Oh well, I do. I mean, I certainly go over it and think. I rewrite sentences I would want to, and also because I'm talking about it now, I go back and read sections to try and remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always ask this question, which of course says so much about me rather than you. What's obsessing you now, and why?
Oh well, I am obsessed about the state of the country, and particularly about what ICE is doing. And as I said, that has made its way into one story. I'm obsessed in a more pleasurable way. I'm obsessed. I'm going to travel soon. A friend of mine has decided that his birthday has to be celebrated in Morocco. So I'm going to Morocco in
wonderful.
October. But I'm very worried that that things will get worse instead of better in terms of the kind of government we have.
And they could. Can you talk at all about, or do you mind talking at all about what you're working on next?
So I'm working on. I have 3 stories that I've done since I finished this book, and one of them I think is still not quite right yet. It's more scattered, and one has to do with this. The story is about a mother and daughter, but the mother in this story grew up as a child in what were Ashkenazi Jewish settlements in China. The Jews were in Shanghai.
I didn't know they were those. Okay.
Yes, they were. Well, in the 30s, of course, everybody was trying to get out, and Shanghai was a place you didn't need a visa for. So there were 20,000 Jews from Eastern Europe and Germany and Austria in Shanghai for a good 10 years. And there were Jews who had been, before that, the Tsar had let them help him settle a town around a railroad that he had built in the 1890s that went from Russia to a place called Harbin in Manchuria. And there was a settlement of Jews in Harbin. And there were also a settlement of Jews in a town called Tianjin, which is another treaty port like Shanghai that had a mixed foreigner population to do various kinds of trading. So they were anyway, sorry to go on about the history, but they were in 3 different places. So I have a character whose mother grew up in Tianjin, in one of these cities, and who remembers it, and who had a boyfriend she remembers very fondly, whose story is told in the story.
So I have just 2 more questions. One is, what advice would you give anyone out there about the quality of mercy?
I would say it's important for us as humans to exert it. And there's a point in the story where one of the characters thinks of, prayers he has said for an absent character and decides they were not in vain. And I think that we should make efforts to be more merciful, and that is one of our defenses against what's happening now.
Okay. And my final question is, what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun? I just want to lighten things up.
Well, I have a dog who's not present now.
I love your dog.
I have a fabulous dog. I have a rescued street dog from Taiwan that I found online. I went to Brooklyn for her, but who's very delightful. So I spend a lot of time with her, talking to everybody in the dog parks, and sort of exercising with her. So that's important. I certainly read for fun. I mean, that's a great pleasure for me. My most recent favorite book is something called Loved and Missed by Susie Boyd, which I think is a fabulous book. She's a British author who's just being published here. I love to gather with friends and eat in good places and travel. Travel's a big fun.
Travel's a lot of fun. Okay, so I want to show this gorgeous cover again. This book is everything. It really and truly is everything. And just head to your favorite indie bookstore and pick it up. Or you can go to bookshop.org. I put the link right in the chat. We have a few comments that I will read to you. Robin says, "Oh, we're all connected, so what are we doing wrong?" Deep pondering. Miriam says, Dara Horn's People Love Dead Jews includes the Chinese Jewish communities.
Yeah, and Harbin. She writes about Harbin. Yeah.
And Laurie Oberman says, looking forward to reading this book. And Renee Hershkovitz says, thank you, Joan, for a fascinating discussion, which thank you for being here. So thank everybody for being here. We'll see you all. If you want to come tonight at 8 o'clock, that's great. If you don't, I'll see you like in a few weeks. And Joan, thank you so much for writing this book and for being here. And everybody else is going to leave, but you stay, you hang on. Oh, wait. Here's another sentence. Here's another question from Jenna Claire. I would love to know, Joan, this book is something I must read. Oh, how I would love to know, Joan. This book is something I must read to help inform the work I'm doing on my third novel. Fabulous. Thank you, Janet. Yeah, it is. It is. So thank all of you for the Russia, especially for the Russia questions. It's always great. We'll see you all next time. Joan, sit tight. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.